Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Okay, I got the tilak on, and it's crooked, just like me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Trying to go straight, but can't quite get it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. The only way to fail is to quit. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Wow. So doing the solitude thing now. I don't know, how long has it been? Now that I look back on it, it's been my whole life. But since I'm aware of it and actually embracing it, solitude, probably about a week. Krishna. In the beginning, it's like really rough. It's like fasting. You know, if you go on a fast, the first few days, like, your body's like, we need food. Come on, where's the food? And you have to deal with that. Like, you gotta. But then after a few days, it's like, okay, so there's no food. Well, we'll just have to make do. And the body starts drawing on all the stored up usually things are stored in the fats, the fat cells. So it starts to burn the fat and take what's stored in there. And a lot of times there's some big contaminants in there from years and years and years ago. You might have eaten something or been exposed to something that got stored up in the fat cells. You fast it burns it all out. That's very purifying. So the solitude also, it's similar. The first few days are like, oh my God, what am I going to do if I can't, like, suck on someone else? You know, get into some kind of a exchange and get something. And, you know, if I can give something, I will. But mostly it's because I want to get something. Krishna. Feed off of somebody else. Needy. Like the baby. Needy. So by the solitude, you start to see a lot of things that Hare Krishna. And there's a chance for it to get burnt up and gone. Goodbye. Don't try to do it without Krishna, though. Without Krishna, you go crazy. So, but if there's Krishna and trying solitude and fasting to try to get more purified, and more dependent on Krishna rather than using other people or taking in foods that you don't need, that just get stored up in the fat cells and become potential for disease. So yeah, it's really good. Fasting, and not everyone has a lifestyle that they can do this. If you've got a family, and that's your service. You're not going to be like fasting in solitude. You have service to family members. Or if you have a work situation where I remember one time, a long time ago, it was probably in the 60s, before coming into contact with Prabhupada's preaching mission, I tried to take a vow of silence, but I had a job. And it was working in an engineering company, and I was doing the ink on mylar drawings. My specialty was sewage. I would do pictures of because it was a highway construction company, civil engineering, and they were designing the roadways. So part of my specialty was, because I was so good with details, was pen and ink on mylar to be stored in the government offices, blueprints of, it was called miscellaneous details, but it was the surge, the surge caps, the surge drains. So all day long I'd be drawing sewers. So I took a vow of silence, and I got away with it for 2 weeks. I'd just come to work, they put the stuff on my desk, and I'd start drawing. And for 2 weeks, I took a vow of silence. Didn't say a word. Hare Krishna, but that was then. I didn't have Krishna as the goal. I was just frustrated with so much social interaction and having no clear who was I? What was I doing here? I was doing this work and I was getting a paycheck and I had food and a place to live, but what else was there? I didn't have that yet. I didn't have Krishna. So doing this solitude, social interaction, Hare Krishna. I do have to go out today and do some errands. But that's not really social interaction. You just go in the store, find the thing you want, and now they have, self-checkout. You don't even have to talk to the cashier. Hi, how are you today? And you don't even have to interact with a person. You can just go through. It's all automated. You put the item in front of the scanner and beep, and in front of the scanner, beep, beep, and then this robot voice says, "Please pay." Thank you. So, Hare Krishna. But what was coming out, I relish this is good, I want it to come out, is I was seeing how much I've actually been violent to people. In my ignorance and in my thrashing around, trying to find whatever it is, not even knowing sometimes what it was, at hurting people. Yeah. Being real nice and getting close and then hurting them. That not necessarily meaning to, just without Krishna, what else can you do? Whatever interaction you have with someone is actually violent. Not to give someone Krishna consciousness is violence. So the only way to be non-violent is to stay in Krishna consciousness. Whatever it is you're doing, whether you're interacting or you're not interacting, to be Krishna conscious, conscious of being part and parcel of the Supreme Being, not this body, and always desiring to develop more and more, not just consciousness of Krishna, but loving reciprocation with Krishna. Uh-oh, we got an angry wasp in here. I don't know how they get in here, but they get in here. I usually get like a cup and I put it over them and then throw them outside if I can catch them. This one is quite angry. I don't know if I can catch him. But I'm going to have to, because I don't want him to bite me. Krishna. Let me see if I can catch him. No, he's coming over here. Ah! Yeah, Krishna. So, let's see if we can catch him. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, here's the trapping equipment. And where did he go? Where are you? Hare Krishna. I'm sure he doesn't want to be in here either. Probably doesn't even know how he got in here. He's got things to do, and it's being in here is not the place to be. He must have thought there was something of value in here. I tend to be a little curious, you know. If there's a small opening, you know. Hop in there. Well, I don't know where he went. He's hanging out somewhere. I must have found something he thought was interesting. Yeah, come on. I want to put you outside, buddy. Believe me, you'll be much happier out there. Trust me on that. But where did you go? As soon as I sit down and try to do a little reading about Krishna, it's going to start flying around again. I know that. Oh, come on. Where are you? Krishna. Bad boy. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, where are you? Ah. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Come on. Where'd you go? Yeah. Last scene over near the couch. All right. Makes his presence known already. Kind of, sort of. All right. I don't know where he went. Oh, I see him. He's on the altar. Oh, Krishna. He's hanging out on the altar. Oh, my goodness. What do I do? Krishna. Okay. You had your darshan. Now, It's time for you to go. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. I don't think you're particularly devotional. If I try to move you, you're going to fly around all over the place, and then it'll be hard to catch you again. I think the only thing to do in this case, please forgive me, is I have some spray. I don't like to do this. I'd rather catch him and put him outside, but I just don't think it's going to work. He's really, really big and he's really angry. He just had his darshan. And so he had darshan, and that's it. Sorry, buddy. I'm really sorry. I wish they made a spray that would just stun them, and then you could pick them up and throw them outside. But I don't think they make a spray like that. You know, something that just... Oh boy, this world. Yeah. Poor little guy. Sorry. Hare Krishna. Well, you have to go. That's the way to go, you know. If I was a bug in the house of a devotee, I wouldn't eat darshan, and then you don't have a chance to do anything more. You're done. No, killing self-defense is allowed. You know, a poisonous snake, a scorpion, and these guys, they can give a mean sting, you know. Oh, Krishna. Florida. Here's another one on the altar. Oh my goodness. What's going on here? You all come. Oh, Krishna. Hey, Krishna. There's a way to go if you have to go. Krishna. Ay, ay, ay. This world. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So, I was saying how I hurt living entities. Now, those were just bugs. That was allowable as self-defense. You know, they're poisonous, they're dangerous. But it's kind of like you know that Scrooge movie, Christmas Past, Present, and Future, where Scrooge starts to see how awful he's been and how he's been so cruel to other people. And he's given the vision of what's going to happen to him because of his behavior. That may have been something that Ajamil went through. Like he was an old man and he lived a very sinful life. He was born into a good family and he was being trained in self-control, and this is one of the oldest stories there is in the Vedas. It's very, very old. And at the time of death, he was a very old man, and he still had been having sex, evidently, and there was his small child was playing near his bedside. Then, traditionally, the culture was to name your children related to Krishna type names, God. So his small son's name was Narayan. But Ajamil had no interest in Narayan. Krishna! No, I'm going to lower planets, that's for sure. Hare Krishna. So he, at the time of death, the agents of Yamaraj came, and they're very, very ugly, and they came to retrieve him, the soul, from the body, which was starting to malfunction and become unusable, uninhabitable. And they had come to retrieve the entity, the soul, out of the dying body for judgment with Yamaraj. What kind of, where he was going to go next. And for him, it would have been a lot of punishment. It would have been the hellish planets. The outlook wasn't good. So these Yamadutas came, and they were quite ugly and frightening. And they had ropes and nooses in which to bind the soul, taken as a prisoner, as a criminal, as a prisoner, for judgment for Yamaraj. He was being arrested. But he called out for his small son in panic, because the little boy, the child, was playing, and he was attached to his little child. He called out, Narayan! 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 Because the names of the Lord, and Narayan is one of the names of God. His many names, that's one name. It refers to the shelter of all living beings, Narayan. He's the shelter of everyone, Narayan. The four-armed form, Vishnu. Because he was calling out, his calls could be heard. So the agents of Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas from the higher planets, the spiritual planets, not just the heavenly, but the spiritual world, came and they confronted the Yamadutas as you can't take it. He's calling out for Narayan. You can't take him for judgment. You're blocked. And the Yamadutas didn't understand. This has never happened before. He was very sinful. It was a long list. He was going to be taken as a prisoner and be tried in the court of Yamaraj. He committed all kinds of horrible acts. But he called out for God at the last moment. His whole life, he never did anything worth anything. The last moment he called out. This is a very old story. This story has survived eons and eons in the Vedas. So, it's very significant. It's an account. It's not a story, it's an account. It's very significant. Especially now, when all there is the Hare Krishna movement and every other type of sacrifice, austerity, welfare work, it doesn't really do a whole lot. It can help a little bit, but it's not going to get you there in and of itself. It's to help. It's a utility principle. But the purity of calling out the holy name of the Lord is really what works in Kali Yuga, this age. So that account is really significant. And he was not, he didn't leave his body at that point. He was given a little more time. And his realizations that he had at that time were enough that he left his family, he left everything. He went to, where did he go? Did he go to Vidūratha? Somewhere, to perform penances and austerities and get ready, fix his mind for when he was actually going to leave, which probably wasn't too much in the future because he's pretty old to begin with. But he went for to make further progress and advancement in becoming disentangled from the illusory energy and getting free from the reactions to all the horrible things he did. So I'm thinking that he had remorse. He had he was praying for forgiveness and for freedom, and that he understood kinds of reactions that were waiting for him for all the horrible things that he did. Stealing, lying, using people, spending his life in sex and sense gratification with a woman who was not particularly elevated. She actually was a prostitute. So he was going to get a lot of reactions. So he had hurt a lot of people, cheated them, lied to them. I don't know if he killed anybody, but whatever. Pretty bad stuff. He was outside civilized human society. He was low and degraded, intoxicants, the whole thing. He really fell down. So I'm thinking that he did have remorse. He understood how much he had hurt other people. In his blindness and his ignorance, he had hurt other people. And I'm feeling some of that. I'm feeling some of that remorse. How I acted with other people, how I used people. How I hurt people. I had a taste for that, hurting other people. I had a taste for it, hurting their feelings. Seeing where they were vulnerable and then attacking. Reminds me of the story of Magrari, the hunter. He learned the art of half-killing animals. He was a hunter, and he would go in the forest and he would simply wound them and leave them in pain, writhing in pain, to die a slow death. Instead of just killing an animal and maybe, low-class person having dinner, But he didn't do that. He would just, for the sport, it was a sport. He would go, he had a taste for it. He'd go into the forest, and he would hunt animals. But he wouldn't kill them. He'd just wound them, and then they would die eventually, suffering a very suffering condition. He had a taste for that, making people suffer. I look back on my life and I see, Now, how did Magrari get it? Well, he learned it from his father. These things are passed down. They're passed down. What is it? Studies have been done. Usually, someone who's been abused as a child will pass that on. They'll become a child abuser. It's something that's familiar to them. They know what it is. Krishna. So this solitude is good. It's very purifying for me. Very sobering. When I look at my history, my behavior. Now, I've been trying to practice this Krishna consciousness for 50 years. But for me, without actually dealing with all this dark stuff and really feeling remorse and really praying forgiveness from the Lord, and praying for the shelter of Mother Hara, Vidūratha, without praying for their shelter, really feeling bad. I don't see how I can make progress. So this is really good that this is coming out, which means that behavior is stopping. That I'm not going to, this pattern is being broken. If it means I have to be in solitude, then I'll be in solitude, because I don't want to have this pattern again. I want this pattern of seeing where people are vulnerable and attacking, and then leaving. Somehow. It's just really, it's really Mugrari the hunter. So what happened to Mugrari? Well, Narada Muni passed by. And when Mugrari saw Narada, he was overwhelmed by his presence. Narada is a pure soul, a pure devotee of the Lord. It said he has dazzling gold hair. His hair is it reddish or golden? I don't know, but it's dazzling. It's got like, at least one description, dazzling gold hair. He's effulgent. His bodily features are perfectly proportioned. And he's always vibrating love of Godhead. He's always singing. Every movement that he makes is like a dance. He's very swan-like. And then when he speaks, it's like a song. It's always beautiful. And when he saw this person, he surrendered. He understood. Just by seeing a devotee of the Lord, he understood his position, how fallen he was. And he took shelter. Please help me. Please help me. That's a spiritual master. There has to be humble submission. There has to be some remorse. There has to be, that has to happen. And Narada instructed him, okay, you're surrendered soul. I can help you. Just don't have kill animals anymore. Stop doing that. Don't do that. Become nonviolent. Be a well-wisher of everyone, even the creatures. Be a well-wisher. As I am your well-wisher, you be a well-wisher for others. I'm wishing you well. Now you wish them well. Don't hurt anyone. Just wish them well. Something like that, anyway. And we don't have the details, but always think of Krishna. Never forget Krishna. Chant Krishna's names. Offer up your activities to Krishna. Like that. So on the don't side is don't hurt anyone. And on the do side is always remember Krishna and be a well-wisher. Like the Lord's Prayer is really a beautiful prayer. I really like that prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Now, when I hear that, I don't hear it as a request. Give us bread. I don't hear that. What I hear is, because it's an old prayer and it's kind of like Old English, I hear it more as a glorification of Lord, like, you give us our daily bread. Only the you part was left off. Give us our daily bread and forgive us as we forgive others. In other words, you give us our daily bread and you forgive us as we forgive others. I hear it more as a reciprocation, glorifying reciprocation with God rather than asking for something. So McGrary lived like that, very peacefully. And one day, Narada, and he was traveling with another saintly person. Was it Parasara or Angira? One of the other sages and saints that has the ability to, mystic ability to travel. And they visited, he said, let's go visit my disciple, Agrari, see how he's doing. And they saw him, and when he saw Narada coming to visit, his spiritual master coming, he was so excited to go and be in his presence. But in order to get from here to there, he saw there were some ants, and he didn't want to step on them. So he was brushing the ants aside to go. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I'm feeling bad about that hornet now, but Hare Krishna. It's all right, self-defense. Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Yeah. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. So that's good. Let me think. Because I'm older now and I could leave at any time. Let me feel some remorse. And not just pride in everything that I did. No, forget that. Forget that. Forget it. All the service I did. Forget it. Just forget that. Forget that part. Let me feel some remorse. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And let me hear about Krishna from my spiritual master. This is a summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And this is the killing of Dantavakra, Vidūratha, and Romaharṣaṇa. So, performance of the Rajasuya sacrifice. Shishupal spoke against Krishna being honored as the first person in Maharaj Yudhishthira's sacrifice. And he spoke very aggressively and antagonistically, and he said in a very challenging, hateful tone that made the other persons present at the sacrifice very angry, and they were getting ready to fight with him and his soldiers. He was a king. Krishna didn't want that to happen in the arena of sacrifice. So very quickly, very neatly, Krishna took his Sudarshan and cut Shishupal's head off. If Shishupal saying bad things about Krishna, it didn't bother Krishna, but he saw the others around couldn't tolerate it. So he took care of the disturbance. But then Shishupal had a friend named Dantavakra, named Shalva. And Shalva was very angry that Krishna killed Shishupal, because Shalva didn't particularly like Krishna either. And so he prayed to Lord Shiva and performed austerities to get a benediction in the form of a miraculous airplane, very unusual airplane, and some other mystic powers. And his intent was to use them against Krishna in the Yadu dynasty. So he attacked, and there was a skirmish, a lot of things went on, but eventually Krishna killed it. I think it was Pradyumna, that Krishna's son, because Krishna was in Hastinapur when Shalva attacked. He was attacking Dwarka, making a mess out of things. And Krishna wasn't there. He was in Hastinapur. So his son, Pradyumna, led the armies. But then Krishna, when he heard the news, he came back and he personally liberated Shalva by killing him. But then Shalva had a friend. These are all kings, leaders of different kingdoms, an alliance with Dantavakra, who became very angry, so angry that he didn't even take an army with him. He just went with a club and he was going to pound Krishna. So Krishna took his club and they met like a duel with clubs. And Dantavakra hit Krishna. Krishna didn't feel a thing. And then Krishna pounded Dantavakra on the chest with his club, and that was the end of Dantavakra. His heart exploded and he was gone. But then Dantavakra, who was actually related to Krishna, he was a cousin somehow, had a brother, Vidūratha, who was angry about Dantavakra. So they're all entangled. And he came, and he didn't even get a chance to strike Krishna. He stood there with a sword and a shield, And Krishna saw he was trying to look for a way to, and he just took care of him right away. What did he use? Did he use his Sudarshan chakra? Okay, so now we're going to something else that involves Lord Balaram. Once upon a time, Lord Balaram heard there was an arrangement being made for a fight between two rival parties in the Kuru dynasty, one headed by Duryodhana and the other by the Pandavas. He did not like the idea that he was to be only a mediator to stop the fighting. Finding it unbearable not to take an active part on behalf of either of the parties. That's interesting. The reason he goes on pilgrimage wasn't because he didn't want them to fight. The reason he left was because he wasn't allowed to fight. If he could have joined in the fighting, he would have done so, but he wasn't being allowed to, and neither was Krishna. They were not allowed to actually take up arms and fight. But this was a battle between the Kurus and the Pandavas. Krishna acted as a charioteer and an advisor to Arjuna, and Balaram was to be a mediator to try to stop the parties of fighting. But he didn't want that. He wanted it. If it was going to be a fight, he wanted a fight. He didn't want to try to stop it. He left Dwarka on the plea of visiting various holy places of pilgrimage. He first of all visited the place of pilgrimage known as Prabhas Sakshetra. He took his bath there, and he pacified the local Brahmins and offered oblations to the demigods, Pitas, great sages, and people in general, according with Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. That is the Vedic method of visiting holy places. So visiting holy places, took a bath, pacified local Brahmins, offered oblations to demigods, Pitas, great sages, and people in general. That is the Vedic method of visiting holy places. After this, accompanied by some respectable Brahmins, he decided to visit different places on the bank of the river Saraswati. He gradually visited such places as Vidūratha, Bindusar, Tritikup, Sudarshan Tirtha, Visala Tirtha, Brahma Tirtha, and Chakra Tirtha. So those are holy places on the river Saraswati. Besides these, he also visited all the holy places on the bank of the Saraswati River running toward the east. After this, he visited all the principal holy places on the bank of the Yamuna and on the bank of the Ganges. Thus, he gradually came to the holy place known as Romaharṣaṇa. So we know there's something really big coming for planet Earth and the universe if Balaram is going to all these holy places and performing these Vedic ceremonies and rituals, and for the people in general, welfare. This holy place, Romaharṣaṇa, is still existing in India, and in ancient times it was especially used for the meetings of great sages and saintly persons with the aim of understanding spiritual life and self-realization. In the virtual world, it's called Zoom. Hare Krishna. When Lord Balaram visited that place, there was a great sacrifice being performed by a great assembly of transcendentalists. Such meetings were planned to last thousands of years. When Lord Balaram arrived, all the participants of the meeting, great sages, ascetics, brahmanas, and learned scholars, immediately arose from their seats and welcomed him with great honor and respect. Some offered him respectful obeisances, and those who were elderly great sages and brahmanas offered him blessings by standing up. After this formality, Lord Balaram was offered a suitable seat. And everyone present worshipped him. Everyone in the assembly stood up in the presence of Balaram because they knew him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Education or learning means to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, although Lord Balaram appeared on the earth as a Kshatriya, and the Brahmanas and sages stood up because they knew who Lord Balaram was. He was incarnated like that, took that incarnation, appeared that incarnation. Unfortunately, after being worshipped and seated at his place, Lord Balaram saw Romaharṣaṇa, the disciple of Vyasadeva, the literary incarnation of Godhead, still sitting on the Vyasasana. He had neither gotten up from his seat nor offered him respects. Because he was seated on the Vyasasana, he foolishly thought himself greater than the Lord. Therefore, he did not get down from his seat or bow down before the Lord. Lord Balaram then considered the history of Romaharṣaṇa. He was born in a Sutta family, or a mixed family born of a Brahmana woman and a Kshatriya man. Therefore, although Romaharṣaṇa considered Balaram a Kshatriya, he should not have remained sitting on a higher seat. Lord Balaram considered that Romaharṣaṇa, according to his position by birth, should not have accepted the higher sitting position because there were many learned Brahmins and sages present. He also observed that Romaharṣaṇa not only did not come down from his exalted seat, but he did not even stand up and offer his respects when Brahmaji entered the assembly. Lord Balaram did not like the audacity of Romaharṣaṇa and became very angry with him. So, according to the material situation, how Romaharṣaṇa was situated in society, he may have been looking at Balaram as Kshatriya, whereas his mother was a Brahmin. His father was a Kshatriya, but his mother was a Brahmin, and he was a disciple of Vyasadeva. He was sitting on the Vyasasana. Well, what would he be speaking? What would his conclusions be if he could speak sitting on the Vyasasana? When Lord Balaram himself, the goal of all the Vedas, appears in the assembly, what on earth would Romaharṣaṇa be able to teach or speak if he's not he's not in a surrendered mood to Balaram, the original spiritual master. So Balaram, he wasn't going to stand for this. No, this guy's got to go. When a person is seated on the Vyasasana, he does not generally have to stand up to receive a particular person entering the assembly. But in this case, the situation was different, because Lord Baladev is not an ordinary human being. Therefore, although Romaharṣaṇa Sutta was voted to the Vyasasana by all the Brahmanas, he should have followed the behavior of other learned sages and Brahmanas who were present and should have known that Lord Balaram is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Respects are always due to him, even though such respects can be avoided in the case of an ordinary person. The appearances of Krishna and Balaram are especially meant for re-establishment of religious principles. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the highest religious principle is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is also confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the topmost perfection of religiousness is to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. When Lord Balaram saw that Romaharṣaṇa Sutta did not understand the highest principle of religious life, religiousness, in spite of having studied all the Vedas, he certainly could not support his position. Romaharṣaṇa Sutta had been given a chance to become a perfect Brahmin, but because of his ill behavior in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his low birth was immediately remembered. Romaharṣaṇa Sutta had been given the position of a Brahmin, but he had not been born in the family of a Brahmin. He had been born in a Pratiloma family. According to the Vedic concept, there are two kinds of mixed family heritage. They are called Anuloma and Pratiloma. When a male is united with a female of a lower caste, the offspring is called Anuloma. But when a male unites with a woman of a higher caste, the offspring is called Pratiloma. Romaharṣaṇa Sutta belonged to the Pratiloma family because his father was a Kshatriya and his mother a Brahmin. Because Romaharṣaṇa's transcendental realization was not perfect, Lord Balaram remembered his Pratiloma heritage. The idea is that any man can be given the chance to become a Brahmin. It's by quality. But if he improperly uses the position of a Brahmin without actual realization, then his elevation to the Brahminical post is not valid. After seeing the deficiency of realization in Romaharṣaṇa Sutta, Lord Balaram decided to chastise him for being puffed up. Lord Balaram therefore said, he was elected by the others. I was elected. Lord Balaram therefore said, this man is liable to be awarded the death punishment because, although he has the good qualification of being a disciple of Lord Vyasadeva, and although he has studied all the Vedic literature from this exalted personality, he was not submissive in the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he has all the qualifications, but he doesn't have the realization, and he's not surrendered. He studied all the Vedic literatures from the exalted personality of Lord Vyasadeva, a disciple, but he missed the point. When of all the Vedas I am to be known, and when that I am to be known is there, standing in front of you, and you don't recognize him, you don't acknowledge, you don't take the surrendered position, you don't become joyful. Oh, missed the point. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, a person who is actually a Brahmana and is very learned must automatically become very gentle also. In the case of Romaharṣaṇa Sutta, although he was very learned and had been given the chance to become a Brahmana, he had not become gentle. From this we can understand that one is puffed up by material acquisition. He cannot acquire the gentle behavior befitting a Brahmin. Gentle means well-wishing. Well-wishing, gentle. he was hard-hearted, puffed up by his position. He wasn't gentle. The learning of such a person is as good as a valuable jewel decorating the hood of a serpent. Despite the valuable jewel on the hood, a serpent is still a serpent and is as fearful as an ordinary serpent. He's decorated with learning and knowledge, but he's still a serpent. And dangerous. If a person does not become meek and humble, all his studies of the Vedas and Puranas and his vast knowledge in the Shastras become simply outward dress, like the costume of a theatrical artist dancing on the stage. Lord Balaram began to consider thus: I have appeared in order to chastise false persons who are internally impure, but externally pose themselves to be very learned and religious. My killing of such persons is proper to check them from further sinful activity. Lord Balaram had avoided taking part in the battle of Kurukshetra, and yet, because of his position, the re-establishment of religious principles was his prime duty. Considering these points, when Krishna and Balarama incarnated 5,000 years ago, that was the mission, was to reestablish religious principles and to annihilate the demoniac forces. And that was 5,000 years ago. That was the mission. Yada yada hi dharma shai blanirvavati bharata. Reestablish religious principles. When Krishna and Balaram appear in recent times, 500 years ago, their mission is to simply give ecstatic love of Godhead. To taste it themselves, experience it from the position of the devotee, of being a devotee of the Lord, to exhibit it, distribute it freely to anyone and everyone. That's the mission now. This was the mission then, 5,000 years ago, and it's connected. It's all connected. How are you going to develop love of Krishna? You have to know some more about Krishna. Gaura-Nitai, they don't appear as God. They appear as devotees. So Krishna appears as Krishna. You have to know about Krishna. And this is what the mission was 5,000 years ago. This is what the Battle of Kurukshetra was about. Now, Krishna did exhibit pastimes in Dwarka and Vraj. So we have some access to what these intimate personality of Godhead in his intimate relations is like. Not just his killing demons and, that's his work. That's his job. Reestablishing religious principles, that's his job. But we also have access into what he's actually like in his loving relationships in Vraj Leela and Dwarka Leela. But that was his work. When he appeared, that was his main mission, was reestablish religious principles was his prime duty. Considering these points, he killed Romaharṣaṇa simply by striking him with a kusha straw, which was nothing but a blade of grass. If someone questions how Lord Balaram could kill Romaharṣaṇa simply by striking him with a blade of kusha grass, the answer is given in Srimad Bhagavatam by the use of the word Prabhu, Master. The Lord's position is always transcendental. Because he is omnipotent, he can act as he likes without being obliged to the material laws and principles. Thus it was possible for him to kill Romaharṣaṇa simply by striking him with a blade of kusha grass. So this kusha grass, these blades of grass, these straws, are what was used to weave together to make these sitting mats for meditation. At the death of Romaharṣaṇa, everyone present became much aggrieved, and there was roaring and crying. Although all the brahmanas and sages present there knew Lord Balaram to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they did not hesitate to protest the Lord's action, and they humbly submitted. Our dear Lord, we think that your action is not in line with religious principles. Dear Lord Yadunandana, we may inform you that we Brahmanas posted Romaharṣaṇa on that exalted position for the duration of the sacrifice. He was seated on the Vyasasana by our election. And when one is seated on the Vyasasana, it is improper for him to stand up to receive a person. Moreover, we awarded Romaharṣaṇa an undisturbed duration of life. Under the circumstances, since your lordship has killed him without knowing all these facts, we think that your action has been equal to that of killing a Brahmana. Dear Lord, deliverer of fallen souls, we know certainly that you are the knower of all Vedic principles. You are the master of all mystic powers. Therefore, ordinarily, the Vedic injunctions cannot be applied to your personality. But we request that you show your causeless mercy upon others by kindly atoning for this killing of Romaharṣaṇa. In other words, to set an example. We do not, however, suggest what kind of act you should perform to atone for killing him. We simply suggest that some method of atonement be adopted by you so that others may follow your action. What is done by a great personality is followed by the ordinary man. So it was setting an example not very good for Krishna or Balaram. They can do anything, but Hare Krishna, others may imitate. The Lord replied, yes, I must atone for this action, which may have been proper for me, but is improper for others. Therefore, I think it is my duty to execute a suitable act of atonement enjoined in the authorized scriptures. Simultaneously, I can also give this Romaharṣaṇa life again, with a span of long duration, sufficient strength, and full power of senses. Not only this, if you desire, I shall be glad to award him anything else which you may ask. I shall be very glad to grant all these boons in order to fulfill your desires. So Balaram is saying, I can bring him back to life. I can reinstate him. I can give him all the boons you gave him. Just give them all back to him. I can do that. And I'd be very glad to grant these boons to fulfill your desires. This statement of Lord Balaram definitely confirms that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is free to act in any way. Although it may be considered that his killing of Romaharṣaṇa was improper, he could immediately counteract the action with great profit to all. Therefore, one should not imitate the actions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should simply follow the instructions of the Lord. All the great learned sages present realized that although they considered the action of Lord Balaram to be improper, the Lord was able to immediately compensate with great profits. not wanting to detract from the mission of the Lord in killing Romaharṣaṇa, all of them prayed. Our dear Lord, the uncommon use of your kosher weapon to kill Romaharṣaṇa may remain as it is. Because of your desire to kill him, he should not be brought back to life again. At the same time, your Lordship may remember that we sages and Brahmins voluntarily gave him long life. Therefore, such a benediction should not be nullified. Thus, the request of all the learned Brahmanas in the assembly was ambiguous, because they wanted to keep intact the benediction given by them, that Romaharṣaṇa would continue to live until the end of the great sacrifice, but at the same time they did not want to nullify Balaram's killing him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead therefore solved the problem in a manner befitting his exalted position and said, because the Son is produced from the body of the Father, it is the injunction of the Vedas that the Son is the Father's representative. Therefore, I say that Ugrasrava Sutta, the son of Romaharṣaṇa, should therefore take his father's position and continue the discourses on the Puranas. And because you wanted Romaharṣaṇa to have a long life, this benediction will be transferred to his son. The son, Ugrasrava, will therefore have all the facilities you offered, long duration of life, in a good and healthy body, without any disturbances, and full strength of the senses. Lord Balaram then implored all the sages and Brahmanas that aside from the benediction offered to the son of Romaharṣaṇa, they should ask from him any other benediction, and he would be prepared to fill it immediately. The Lord thus placed himself in the position of an ordinary Kshatriya, and informed the sages that he did not know in what way he could atone for his killing of Romaharṣaṇa, but whatever they would suggest, he would be glad to accept. The Brahmanas could understand the purpose of the Lord, and thus they suggested that he atone for his action in a manner which would be beneficial for them. They said, our dear Lord, there is a demon of the name Balvala. He is the son of Ilvala, but he is a very powerful demon, and he visits this sacred place of sacrifice every fortnight on the full moon and moonless days, and creates a great disturbance to the discharge of our duties in the sacrifice. O descendant of the Dasahar family, we all request you to kill this demon. We think that if you kindly kill him, that will be your atonement on our behalf. The demon occasionally comes here and profusely throws upon us contaminated, impure things like pus, blood, stool, urine, and wine, and he pollutes the sacred place by showering such filth on us. After killing Balvala, you may continue touring all the sacred places of pilgrimage for 12 months, and in that way you will be completely freed from all contamination. That is our prescription. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. So Balaram's acting like the Kshatriya, so the Brahmins are acting like Brahmins. They come up with this prescription for atonement because Balaram is willing to accept it as a Kshatriya. And this Ugrasrava Sutta, the son of Romaharṣaṇa, was actually present at the assembly of Parikshit Maharaj on the banks of the Ganges, and he wait a minute, how does that work? Sutta Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj, that's after Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra hasn't taken place yet. Parikshit hasn't been born yet. And Sutta Goswami, well, how is that? Now, this Namasharanya is to last for 1,000 years. How was Sutta Goswami at the assembly of where Sukadev spoke to Maharaj Pariksit when that hasn't happened yet? But he's here seated on the Vyasasana. I don't know. Another question, along with how did King Satyavratha get the giant fish, Matsya, who was too big for the lake, into the ocean? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Let's see. Okay, my day is starting. I gotta do some running around. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Please let me always feel this remorse. Let me always feel how sinful my life has been. Let me see that pattern of, it's like a predatory pattern, seeing someone's vulnerability and attacking. Let me always feel remorse for that. Let me feel some remorse. And let that be an impetus to seek shelter of my spiritual master and to develop a loving mood and an attraction to the personality of Godhead, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Radha Krishna, and to chant their names sincerely. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Not to talk nonsense, and not to do violence, but to become gentle and a well-wisher of everyone, as my spiritual master is a well-wisher. My well-wisher. Let me become a well-wisher. Yeah, so the solitude program's pretty good. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.